Hello, dear friends. In this video, I'd like to explain a little bit how our thoughts and perceptions influence our body and physical environment. For example, firstly, we receive some information from the environment. We see something, we hear something, we talk to someone, we see someone, and so on. In that moment, the cognitive structures of our brain are stimulated to perceive the information, and if we are not completely present in the moment, usually this information is understood according to our already established way of thinking, referring to previous experience and understanding about the topic. Our thoughts then create certain emotions also that depend on our subjective perception, right? For example, if I feel I'm going to be hurt, I'm likely to feel anxious. And due to these feelings and emotions and thoughts, I decide to isolate myself and not pursue some of my dreams and desires. So, based on my thoughts and emotions, I make decision also about my behavior, or we all, right? The decision, what kind of identity we choose to have in this situation and what we have learned from it depends on our awareness. It is also important to know that this cognitive structure can manifest as an emotionally significant event pattern that began in our childhood. And this later builds into specific beliefs about the world and about the self. A person, for example, may believe that all politicians are corrupt, or that the world is a dangerous place, or that work should serve a spiritual purpose, for example. Or on a personal level, perhaps during the childhood, the mother or the father did not pay attention to you, so you felt neglected and developed the belief that you are not worthy, that you are not good enough. This is an example of a destructive belief about which we may not be completely aware about, but it really influences our emotional well being. And this is why this belief needs to be healed and changed. Because in reality, we are all worthy, but we're not really aware about due to these previous life experiences, especially from our childhood in our family that we most care about. For example, when we are children, we are especially sensitive and vulnerable, and certain painful events we may have experienced them in our childhood as very threatening, and due to our sensibility, and we're actually not able to completely emotionally process this emotion, this feeling, this pain. So we kind of freeze our nervous system, and in this way these feelings, emotions stay stuck in our body and nervous system, that they also afterwards make us feel uh, in a negative way about ourselves, even though we don't actually have the guilt for that. Because very often as children, when we are not able to explain ourselves why certain events are happening, for example in our closest environment, for perhaps the mother or the father doesn't feel really good, and the child cannot really understand this, so it actually gives the guilt to himself because it feels responsible, and actually it is not our guilt. But this is how we work or function as children. So, how our thoughts get translated into emotions and what exactly happens to our body. So, the image in the mind from our thoughts is translated in the brain into chemistry, which then goes to the body to create a physical complement to the image in the mind. And Dr. Bruce Lipton, the famous scientist in biology and epigenetics, usually uses the example of seeing someone we love. A picture of love in the mind is translated in the brain by the brain into very specific chemistry. In a state of love, the brain releases dopamine for pleasure in the blood, and it also releases oxytocin, which is a chemical that helps us bind to the source of love we're experiencing. It also, the experience of love also releases the chemical vasopressin, which helps us become more attractive to the person we love. And it also releases the growth hormone that influences our growth. All of these chemicals enhance the vitality and health of all 50 trillion cells in our body, which have their own nervous system and their own brain and their own immune system, and so on and so on. The result is that the chemistry of the body is adjusted by the perception of the mind, right? On the other hand, we also have the example where instead of seeing love, we see something that scares us. And in a state of fear, the brain does not release the chemicals associated with love, but it releases chemicals associated with fear, which are actually stress hormones and inflammatory agents, changing the chemistry of the body. So we can recognize that the fate of the cell is directly dependent on the chemistry in the body. With stress hormones and inflammatory agents released in the blood, one changes the genetics and behavior of the cells and starts to express a protection attitude, which is antagonistic to growth. And in fact, it cancels growth. The protection chemicals in the blood allocate energy for fight or flight, getting ready to run from this perceived fear, right? So, the chemistry in our body or our emotions that largely result from how one interprets certain event rather than on the event themselves, because everybody can interpret events differently. What for one something may be interesting or beautiful, for another person may not be interesting and beautiful. So in any case, what we believe is what we become. However, the encouraging point is that these cognitions are directly under our control. Once we recognize this, we no longer have to accept things as automatic reflection of reality. Instead, our thoughts can be evaluated as destructive or constructive in accordance with their emotional effects. So, behind almost every emotion is a hidden cognition. People who are frequently depressed, anxious, or chronically angry must have certain habitual thoughts that produce these feelings. Chronically negative feelings reflect chronically negative beliefs. Bringing these beliefs into our conscious awareness is the first step in changing the moods and feelings that our thoughts normally generate. So, we should choose our reality wisely, right? Because depending on the reality we choose for us in our own mind, it also manifests in our body and physical environment. Our psyche is deeply influenced by our reality, by our environment. But depending on our awareness and level of perception, we can control or direct what is going to influence us and what kind of chemicals um, we will allow into our bodies. And in that way, we determine how we are affected by our experiences. And this is the step towards emotional intelligence. So the question is, are we able to discern what is good for us and what is not good for us? And this is also like where you need to kind of really dive into yourself and question yourself in the most sincere and genuine way. Is this the reality I want to choose? Does this resonates with me on deepest level? Is this making me feel good? Is this making me feel happy about myself? Or is it something that makes me feel bad And I actually don't want to be part of such reality. Or perhaps there is a lesson I need to learn in order to change the way I feel about the same thing. Because it may not be something that I need to worry about, because actually we live in an abundant world and we just need to open up to the possibility for that. And we do that through our mind and our feelings. However, I also have to emphasize that changing our perceptions and beliefs is not always so easy due to these certain emotional blockages or traumatic events from our childhood or from our past that have not been processed correctly due to this emotional stress, what we've talked about, and they are still stuck in the body. So these stuck destructive emotions contributed to the creation of the destructive beliefs, and they are all being pushed into our unconsciousness. So this is why I also use astropsychology and the EFT tapping technique to help the person to release these emotions and make shift in the emotional well-being and perceptions of the person that eventually should bring us to more fulfilled and happier inner state. And as a final word, I'd like to conclude, it all begins and ends in our mind. What we give power to has power over us. Our environment is a reflection of our thoughts and beliefs. Work on mastering your mind to create the life of your dreams. With that being said, my friends, thank you so much for watching this video and see you in the next one. Much love to you all.